PrecambrianLullaby, a friend and subscriber, an early subscriber actually, posted a response to my 5 Stupid Things video this week, and he particularly was responding to my question about what is so great about Lady Gaga. And he actually he answered the question very well, I thought. First, he pointed out that I was asking to objectify taste, and that's true. That's exactly what I was doing, and that doesn't make any sense. Taste is not objective, taste is subjective, and just because I don't get something or don't like something doesn't mean that there is some standard that I'm missing, or but I react that way sometimes to things when something is just really popular, and not just popular, but acclaimed, and I just don't get it. I wonder if there's something that I'm missing, if there's some angle that I haven't viewed it from that would make it clear to me why everyone else thinks it's so great. And I don't think there is with Lady Gaga. I think there's just something about her music, and not just her, but that entire genre of music that I'm just not going to get, that it's just not for me. Someone else commented on the video that her music is best appreciated in a nightclub with a good DJ. And some of the most, I don't go to nightclubs. I've been to a club like maybe once in my life, and it was one of the worst experiences of my life. And I don't even go to bars very much. I mean, some of the most boring nights of my life have been passed at bars with friends. I would much rather just hang out at somebody's house and have a couple of beers and watch a movie or something, or watch wrestling, which I'll get to in a second, than go out to a club or to a bar. It's just not my scene. It's just loud and it's dark, and it's just, I just don't dig the club experience. But PrecambrianLullaby said that he is not like a huge Lady Gaga fan either, but he learned to appreciate her when he heard her music come on while he was out with some friends, and he started dancing to it without realizing what he was listening to. And then after he had been dancing, one of his buddies said, "Hey, dude, that was Lady Gaga you were dancing to." And he sort of, and to his credit, he was honest enough with himself to realize that in spite of himself, he liked that Lady Gaga song. And I think that it takes a big man to admit that to himself, to admit that you like something that you didn't think you liked. And I would hope that I'm that type of person too. But as far as Lady Gaga goes, I don't think I'm ever going to quite get there. I mean, as I've said before, I really admire her as a public figure. I really admire her her position as a stalwart advocate for the gay community. I think that's awesome. And she, I mean, I guess, you know, she writes her own songs. She does her own thing. She's not as manufactured as a lot of other singers and performers in that genre of music. So she deserves a lot of credit for that. But I just don't like the music. I think that's just what it comes down to. I just don't like it. I just don't get it. And I just don't think there's much content there. But PrecambrianLullaby also said something like, you know, he doesn't like it when people will say, will admit that a particular song is catchy, but then they'll say, oh, but it sucks. You know, yeah, okay, that song is terrible, but it is really catchy. And he sort of called bullshit on that. And I agree with him about that. I think that's, you know, just because there's no objective standard for catchy either. See, what is catchy to one person might not be catchy to another person. So if you admit to someone that you heard, let's say, a Lady Gaga song at the bar or at the club, and you found it catchy and you wanted to move, and then you try to say that you don't like the song, you're not really being honest with yourself. Because, I mean, not everybody finds it catchy. Not everybody even enjoys it to the level that you enjoyed it. So you must like something about it. So yeah, that's kind of a bullshit, inconsistent position. And I feel really great about digging this deep into like and dislike of Lady Gaga, I gotta tell you. He also brought something up in his video sort of as like a counter question to mine. I couldn't fathom what people love so much about Lady Gaga. And he asked, you know, well, what is it that you find so great about pro wrestling? And I just have to throw myself on the mercy of the court and say that there really is no reason why I love wrestling as much as I do. I just do. And I don't think I've ever really tried to argue for it. I mean, because my wife doesn't really get the wrestling thing at all. Some friends that I've had in the past haven't really gotten it. I'm fortunate that I have a group of friends that I'm close with now that are more or less, if not fans of wrestling, at least aware of it and sort of tolerant of it, not automatically hostile to it. But I recognize that it's a vice, you know. It's a guilty pleasure, and it is incredibly homoerotic, as Precambrian Lullaby said. It is, in fact, homoerotic is almost all that it is. I mean, it's very little else besides homoerotic. And it's been that way for a long time. I mean, he talked about how, you know, they're like really fit guys and their bodies are all greased up and they're wearing almost nothing. And the grease is a relatively recent advent. It's sort of an addition to the pro wrestling look and style that came about in the 80s, and I think it was adapted from professional bodybuilding. But they weren't always so oily and greasy. I think they started doing that in the 80s when the physique became very important and they wanted to emphasize the physique. But even back in the 70s, the comparatively quaint days of the 70s, when there really wasn't a dominant national promotion. There were just a lot of regional territories, and most of the territories were governed by the National Wrestling Alliance, but there wasn't really any such thing as like a national TV presence. There were local territories that had their own television, many of them in their local markets, but there wasn't like something like we have on TV now, like Raw or SmackDown or Impact, that is on everywhere. And it was a much smaller business, and they weren't as oily and greasy, and they weren't nearly as good looking as modern pro wrestlers, as some modern pro wrestlers, and not nearly as charismatic in the way that we measure charisma nowadays. But it was still really, really, really homoerotic. I mean, shockingly so sometimes. Like, look at this moment from a match. This is Bruno Sammartino versus Killer Kowalski. Look at this. Watch this and tell me this isn't the most homoerotic thing you've ever seen. I mean, including the movie 300. This is incredibly homoerotic. Watch this. There they are. Okay, and look. What does it look like they're doing? What does it look like Killer Kowalski is doing to Bruno? Exactly. And that was from the 70s. So it's not a new thing. So there's no excuse. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with homoeroticism. Homoeroticism is fine, but most wrestling fans, if challenged on that, would sort of bristle or bridle or try to defend wrestling against what they would perceive as the charge of homoeroticism. I'm perfectly willing to accept that observation as completely accurate. It's really, pro wrestling is just really, 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 really gay. I mean, it's one of the gayest things ever, and I'm cool with that. I'm content enough and confident enough in my own sexuality that I don't get uncomfortable watching the wrestlers roll around in their near nakedness, even though I'm very aware of how gay it is, because I'm just not, you know, so it's gay. I enjoy it. I enjoy it for reasons other than the fact that it's gay, and I'm totally cool with it being gay. But as for, I mean, why do I like it? I don't know. There's just really not a reason. I mean, I thought about this before I turned the camera on, because he said, you know, what is it that you like about it? And I wrote in a comment back to him that I really don't know. And I did some thinking, and I've thought about this before, and I really don't know. I just like it. I've liked it since I was a little kid. There's just something about wrestling that I just like. And, I mean, I can pick out parts of it that I like more than other parts of it. Like, I mean, I tend to like the actual matches more than the talking, which has become much more prevalent in the last 15 years or so than it had been previously. And, I mean, I like when a wrestler gives an interview or a promo, as it's called, when he's talking on the microphone, I like those when they're done to build up a particular match, when they're done to hype a particular match between the person talking and the person he's talking about. But when it's just guys going out there and just telling jokes or trying to get over with the crowd, I get really, really, really bored with that. But I don't know. I mean, I just like pro wrestling, and I make no excuse for it, and I make no justification for it. I admit that it's a rather low form of entertainment. I admit that it is not theater at its finest, but I just like it. I just like it, and I always have. And if I'm allowed to like pro wrestling as much as I do, then anyone else is allowed to like whatever they like as much as they like it. That's just the way it is. There's no use there's no use being a snob about anything if you're a pro wrestling fan. You lose that right. You lose the right to snobbery if you're a pro wrestling fan, and that's, for better or worse, what I am.